I'm with the Cambhams here at the National Hamfest, and one of the most impressive sights is to see the Cambhams portable shack, is how I'm going to describe it. The guys refer to her as Flossie, but she's a portable shack. And I have Lawrence with me.
Hi, Mike at 0 Lima Charlie Mike.
And I have Rob with me.
Mike 0 Victor Foxtrot Charlie.
And both Lawrence and Rob were involved in the build of this wonderful unit. So, Lawrence, tell us more about it. How did you come about this particular van, and what makes it so special?
Well, this is Flossie Mark II. We started with Flossie Mark I, how long? About 7 years ago now. This was a van that we were given, which came with a mast, came with some basic bench work, a little bit of electrics, some basic lighting, and we used that very successfully for quite a few years until the rust caught up, as it does with a lot of commercial vehicles. And we had to, unfortunately, say goodbye to Flossie 1. So we went shopping for Flossie 2, and because we had already had a van set up as a mobile shack or a portable shack, we knew a little bit about what we wanted to achieve. So we started from a blank canvas of getting a 2012 Ford long wheelbase transit van. She's silver. And from that we started thinking about how to actually build it to make it useful in various radio uses. Now, you might think, why would you want a mobile shack? Well, maybe you've got the problem of not being able to get planning permission to put up aerials at home. Well, if you had a mobile shack with a mast, you could put it up even on your driveway, and no one can really object about that. But maybe you want to actually take your mobile shack somewhere interesting to operate. Maybe a rare web square, maybe a rare locator square, maybe somewhere a bit more exotic like an island off the coast. Somewhere you can get to with a ferry, obviously, if you've got a large van. But, yeah, you can go fun places, maybe national parks, somewhere more interesting than just suburban gardens around England. So, mobile shack. Other things that this one does for us is it allows us to put on a station like the special event station at the National Hamfest here very quickly and easily. Gives us a great amount of space where we can show off the hobby. So, lots of interesting uses. And, yeah, a bit of an interesting story around the build.
Okay, so that's a real good start. Now I'm going to get Rob to give us how did you go about building it, Rob?
Thanks, Martin. So we started, of course, with the basic van. It was an ex-double glazing van. We figured that meant it had been driven, 50% of its life at least. And we started off by taking everything out. And that was the preparation stage. So we learnt some things from Flossie Mark I that Lawrence mentioned, and this time we built in, for example, insulation from the start. That makes it much more comfortable if you're out doing maybe one of the Tuesday evening UK activity contests in the winter. It keeps you a bit warmer inside, that's nice. Insulation first, lining. That's your basic chassis to build from. We wanted to keep it very flexible, as well as doing events like we have here at the Hamfest. She also acts, for example, as a Raynet control vehicle. Very different setup. Field days, different again. We're involved with one of the local community broadcast radio stations, Cambridge 105. So that means that in that capacity, she's a radio outside broadcast studio with a load of audio gear in here. So actually we went for a very flexible layout. The basic operating bench stays the same. Storage happened in the form of shelves. The first Flossie had cupboards and drawers, and we found that over time those got damaged. They were very hard to work with. They fell open during transport. So we stayed away from that and built everything around the little plastic, really useful boxes. Makes it much easier to see what you've got, much more legroom because you can get them out of the way. So little things like that we learnt from the first one, and we could then bring to the second one and build it up into a space that lets us put 3 stations we've got here this weekend, or a control operation, or a radio studio.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I'm sitting in this van with the boys. It's almost at the end of the National Hamfest. The clouds are coming over, and it's quite warm in here, so I'm quite pleased I'm in the warm. So yeah, I think that's a pretty good job. But the layout is a long bench behind us, which, as you say, is an operating area. Shelves above, but you also have mains hookup and 12 volts and lots of other things in here, don't you, Lawrence?
As I said, a whole group of us got involved in the build. I think it took us about 4 or 5 months, beginning of 2016, every weekend. Group of us putting in quite long weekends and relaxing by going to work after the weekend. So, as Rob said, lots of insulation, lots of build out that, shelving and so on. After we got the shelves and the bench in, yes, electrical work. So we've put in 20 power sockets. You might think that sounds a bit excessive in a van, but you know, if you've got if you've got a rig plus a linear plus a rotator plus a laptop, you've already used 4 just for one station. We've catered for putting in 3 stations, so that's 12 used. Someone will come along with a mobile phone and say, where do I plug my mobile phone into charge? You know, you start using sockets very quickly. We thought about network cabling because we're using computer logging, or with a radio station, if we're using it for outside broadcast, we'll have playout systems, we'll have news screens so that we can see what's coming in on the news, we'll have email screens so that we can see when people send messages to the station. All of that requires network and computers. So rather than having a bunch of cables all over the place that are always getting lost or broken or damaged, we put in a proper structured network cabling. So there are network sockets in the van coming back to a patch panel with a switch. So we've done what we call a proper job. We've put in a DC power ring, so there's 12 volt power with power poles and screw down banana plug connectors, so that someone arrives with a rig with a power pole connection, we can plug in, or if just a pair of bare wires or ring terminals, we can connect that up. Battery in the van as well, so big leisure battery hiding in front of the wheel arch on the left hand side. That's connected up to a nice charging system so that when we have shore power hooked up to the van, we're charging with the charging system. Otherwise, there's a split charging unit. So as we're driving, the vehicle's alternator is charging the vehicle's batteries, as well as our leisure battery that's driving rigs and amateur equipment. So quite a lot of flexibility around how we can power things and how we can actually provide power into the van. I said we've got a hookup on the outside, standard caravan style hookup. We can get, like we've got the Cambhams here, shore hookup from the site. Otherwise, a small generator gets us going.
Yeah. Well, that's all very well, and sounds like the inside's been very well thought out. But one of the most impressive parts of Flossie, isn't it, is above us. How tall's the mast, Rob?
It goes up to 20 metres or 60 foot. It's a Clark mast. We were very fortunate to get this mast with the first Flossie. And whilst the van fell apart into a pile of frost, the mast was still in very good condition. So we actually took that out of the van, patched up the hole so that we could get rid of it on eBay, and that kept the worst of the rain out, and then we moved the mast across. We get a lot of questions from people saying, oh, do you have to reinforce the floor of the van when you put a mast in? Well, not too much. It's sitting on a square of wood, I guess about ½ a metre square, and the mast only weighs about 80 kilograms. That's really just a person. So if you imagine you standing on a van floor, it's the same pressure as the mast, so actually that's not a problem. We did reinforce the roof, another lesson we learned from the first one, where the mast goes through the roof. If it got a little bit windy, you could just see the roof flexing a little bit. So on this one, we actually bonded a sheet of 3mm aluminium. That kept everything nice and rigid, and means that it's definitely going nowhere. If it gets a bit windy, we can put guys out on the mast, but to be honest, for the small 2-metre beam that we've got up today on a weekend with light wind, it'll just stand freely.
That sounds good. But there's also, looking at the van, there's 2 other things that make it quite unique as well. You've got a nice roof rack on the top and a hatch to go skywards from the van.
That's a skylight, you know, we've got to have poshness in some way, or a sunroof. So yes, the roof rack came with the van. When we bought it as an ex-glazing van, it had a big side rack for carrying sheets of glass and a big roof rack for, I guess, ladders and other bits and pieces. We got them to get rid of the side rack because there's no way we're going to be carrying bits of glass around anymore, but we kept the roof rack, which is great because it's got a walkway. It's a very sturdy roof rack. The challenge, of course, is how do you get onto the roof to work on the mast, to put aerials up there and so on. Now, on our previous van, we had a ladder on the back door. Problem with that is it tends to pull against the bodywork. It's never that sturdy, and if you see a van with a ladder up the back door, you look at the condition of it, they never look great very long. We decided to do away with that idea and put a hatch in the roof that allows us to put a small loft ladder up inside and climb up that ladder through the hatch onto the roof. Means that it's now a lot more secure on the roof. No one can just walk past our van, climb up the ladder and mess around on the top of the van. But it also means it's very easy to stand in the van and work on things on the actual top of the mast, pass things up through the hatch to someone working on the roof. So it makes it a lot easier. challenge with hatches is you want something sturdy that someone can actually stand on if they need to, because you're putting it in the roof, but you want something that's also, more importantly, waterproof. So where do you go? You turn to the boating world. So boating hatches that you'd put into expensive boating equipment generally means it's an expensive bit of equipment, and we're looking at £400 to £500 for decent grade marine hatches. Now they come in various sizes. We picked one that fits the average of us. So yes, you do have to think about who's going to be going through the hatch and will they fit. So we tried various things. We made a few templates and tested a few people. Picked this one and installed that, which involved, of course, cutting another hole in the roof, which if anyone's cut a hole in something and thought carefully, yes, you've measured about 5 times and got 3 people to confirm that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's very impressive. Now, Rob, in here you've got LED lighting. That's been the big problem for a lot of people. I'm surprised to see it.
So it's almost it's never the LEDs themselves that are the problem. It's always the power supplies when you get noise from LED lighting. So in a mains installation, it's the thing that goes from 240 volts mains down to normally around 12 volts or a few volts per LED, and it's always that's the problem. Here they're direct feed 12 volt LED strips. You can get this on eBay or other online retailers for a few £, for a 5 metre strip of it. And here we've just stuck it into the lid of electrical mini trunking and screwed that onto the roof. That keeps it nice and secure. And it means you get a very well distributed light, fairly low power. We think we've probably got about 40 watts of lighting in here. That keeps the van nice and bright. A couple of strips along the roof and one under the shelves just to give some nice light onto the desk without casting glare into the operator's eyes. So no problems with noise whatsoever, and we expected that to be the case.
Yeah, you answered that question well, because there's been a lot of talk about noise and one thing with a lot of these lighting systems, so that's a good one. Now, Lawrence, she's a lovely van, but what about insurance? I mean, you know, if somebody was to build one of these, how would they go about telling their insurance company? Would they have to explain that it was a modified van?
So the big secret is, first of all, start with a broker. Don't try any of the online comparison sites because they're all probably going to get a bit confused, especially if you're thinking about using it as a group. So we have, as a group, a lot of users of this van, and you don't really want to have to maintain a named drivers list with your insurance company, especially since they've all cottoned on to the idea of, you're making a change, that'll be £40, please. So you want to get a policy that covers you for a group use. So our policy we have covers drivers who are over 25 and have clean licenses, as long as they've got permission of the group. Now, you said, what about if it's modified? So we started with the questions, and we said, you know, they'll say, have you modified the vehicle in any way? And we said, well, yes, but what are you worried about? And they said, well, have you modified the engine? And we said, nope. Have you modified the exhaust? Nope. Have you changed anything on the suspension? Nope. And they said, well, what have you modified? Well, we said, we've put a 60-foot mast in the roof. It sticks out about a foot out of the top of the roof, and our bridge clearance is now 13 feet. And they said, no, that's fine. You haven't modified the van as far as the insurance company is concerned. So it is what you change on the vehicle that is constituting the modifying, and it's normally around performance and how it drives.
Yeah. So being honest up front solves a lot of problems. But now I suggest she's about 3.5 ton vehicle, so everybody can drive it, yeah?
Exactly that, and that was one of the things we definitely looked for when we were selecting the vehicle. Most of us in the Cambhams have driving licenses issued after that change to the maximum weight, and she's plated so that she's under the 3.5 ton limit, but also we've still got capacity to add a 750 kilogram trailer on the tow bar. We have a small trailer mast, and still keep the maximum train weight, the combined maximum weight of both components, under 4.25 tons, which again means that someone on a newer driving license can drive the pair of them without having to take the additional trailer license.
Yeah, so that's all good news. So in many ways, you've really thought this one out well. And for anybody else who's thinking of doing a similar exercise, what sort of money would it cost them, Lawrence?
So obviously you can go shopping for a van. We bought a 4-year-old ex-commercial van with around, what do we have, about 80,000 miles on the clock, and that costs us just about £8,500. Obviously, you shop around and you look at the quality of the van, the quality of the engine, and the mechanical side of it. You're going to do things like we did of stripping out the inside, looking for all the rust, treating the rust, sealing up all the holes, making sure that the van is going to last you as long as you can, doing things like wax oiling the undersides and everything you can to protect against stuff that kills vans, which is generally rust and condition. After that, you start thinking about what you're going to spend money on. Now, if you don't have, like we were fortunate, a Clark mast. Now, the Clark mast we've got, to replace that, you're talking nearly £10,000, so it's not a cheap mast. You can go across to our friends at Total Mast Solutions and you can spend half that on a very comparable mast. You can buy a smaller mast. Maybe you don't need something such this sort of height, or you can look at the online retailers and the likes of eBay or the military auction houses, and you can look for the Scam 12 masts. Those are pretty solid masts, and with a bit of servicing, they're certainly going to have plenty of life left in them. You can get all the service kits to make them work as far as holding air and going up nicely. And one of our friends, Jeff, just across the grass from us, has done that with his van. He's put a Scam 12 in that by cutting a hole in the roof, taking the Scam's box off and mounting the Scam 12 in there. Now, those masts you can pick up anywhere between £300 and £500. So you're suddenly talking about very affordable mast options there. Obviously, you've got some wood and carpentry that you're going to be doing, so you need some people with possibly power tools and so on. So all the friends who've got decent workshops and the right tools to cut wood, building it out. You're going to do some painting because you want to make it look a bit nice. You're going to do some insulating. We spend a bit of money on insulation. You're going to do things like put some carpeting down. Find someone who's done an office refit and see if you can scrounge all of their old carpeting, or even if they've got offcuts, and use that to carpet your van. So lots of options around how to keep the costs down. We probably spent in total, if we had to buy the mast, if we went across to Total and we bought a mast, we'd probably spend £14,000 to build another Flossie from scratch with nothing to start from.
Yeah, so it's not mega expensive, and you know, it's one of those things. When you consider you could buy a rig from the big manufacturers for getting on for £9,000 anyway, and that's just the radio. So having a full shack with a massive mast doesn't, in that comparison, is not mega expensive. But
Well, if you went off shopping for a tower, what does a large tower cost you that you're going to put in your back garden?
too true, too true. So. You told me earlier that Flossie gets used for more than just yourselves. Is that an advantage?
It is, and it makes it a lot easier to justify. We're out here with Cambhams clothes on today, doing a special event station, but we also take part in various contests. She gets used by Cambridgeshire Raynet, typically either as a control station or as a talk-through repeater station. The mast obviously comes into its own there. Other days we're out with Cambridge 105 radio, which is the broadcast station. So she might look like an outside broadcast studio, providing live sound at an event, that sort of thing. And the more organisations you can get together, the more people that are using it, the easier it is to justify that ongoing financial commitment, because of course you do have the insurance, the road fund licence, MOTs, any work that needs doing on an ongoing basis. The more people that you can get involved in this, the more ways that you can split that cost, and actually it ends up being pretty cheap to run.
Yeah, and I suppose the thing is, if it's being used and not sitting in a field,
What's the point?
Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense. So a fantastic vehicle, in fairness, and you guys have done a really good job. You two and the rest of the boys. We ought to mention the rest of the boys, but
there was a team involved in, and if you lift up one of the carpet tiles in the back corner, there's all the call signs of people who were involved in the build, and I think it's about 15 people overall. So this was a massive team effort. You get people that can do different things. You get Jeff, who was experienced in van conversion. You get Colin, who's experienced with metalwork. A few of us can do carpentry. Someone else can design the electronics. It's a team effort, and you just draw on everyone's skills and come together as a project.
which is brilliant.
Now, if you go to our Twitter account, G3PYE on Twitter, and you scroll back to January 2016, you can actually follow the timeline of the build. You'll see when we bought the van, you'll see how we started stripping it out, you'll see an animated, a pictorial diary of our build, and I'm sure Martin maybe will put some pictures on the blog. But if you want to see Flossie in person, she's out and about at places like the RSGB convention in a few weeks' time, and various other special event stations around certainly the southeast throughout the year.
Certainly is. And I'm sure if you look for G3PYE or G6PYE on the air, there's going to be a fair chance, not guaranteed, but a fair chance you'll be working Flossie. Is that correct?
It certainly is. Normally with a portable on the end of the call sign. Sometimes also with an S in there as well, GS3PY when we're up in Scotland.
Yeah. So all of your, that's good. Listen, guys, I've taken much of your time. It's coming to the end of the show and everybody's packing up. So listen, thank you very, very much for your time. Thanks.
Cheers, Martin.
Thanks, Martin, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you again.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence and Rob, for that one.